The Oort Perimeter, Chapter 21. Corbin watched his display with surprised interest. That's unusual. The Varnock have ceased fire and are pulling back, he said. A small cheer went up across the command center. Alfred strolled over and looked at the display. It's possible they're regrouping to try something else. They wouldn't have come this far, and risked this much, to give up so easily, he said. The console in front of Bentley beeped. He studied it, and then squinted in curiosity. They're forming up as though they're going to charge the shield, he said. Corbin laughed. That'd ridiculous. You have to be insane to try ramming your way through. The console beeped again and began displaying a faint signal indicating a high-energy pressure wave rapidly approaching the area of Gate 27. It was at this moment that Bentley's eye caught the latest status report on the shield array, causing his heart to sink. Oh, cat's out of the bag. Corbin, it looks like the Varnock have detected the resonance wave and are trying to use it to breach the shield, he said. Corbin rushed over to the console and studied the readouts before swearing profusely. This was the last thing they needed right now. Isn't there some way you can dissipate the wave to prevent them from exploiting it? Asked Alfred. Corbin shook his head. We can only do that if we shut down a portion of the shield and let the wave dissipate naturally. But that'll also leave us vulnerable to the Varnock. But, if we don't, the Varnock will use the wave to create a singularity event that will breach our shields. Alfred nervously ran his fingers through his hair. So either way we're about to lose the shield. I'm sorry, sir, but there's nothing we can do. Actually, there may still be, said Bentley. Both men turned to him in curiosity. What do you mean? Asked Corbin. Well, I just happened to think of something. The resonance wave only occurred on the exterior face of the shield array. However, it didn't happen on the internal face, or on either side of the Kuiper perimeter. That means it's possible that the resonance wave is actually a side effect of the shield's normal operation. So how does that help us? Asked Corbin. Well, to better understand that, you have to understand that the shield is designed to absorb and neutralize nearly any form of energy or matter that touches it. But, in doing so, it expends energy. This, in turn, creates a bubble of free energy above the main shield face. Normally this energy would dissipate naturally into space. But apparently the energy flowing toward the shield is greater than the force expelling it, thus all the waste energy generated by normal operation subsequently builds up on the surface of the shield like a puddle of water. As such, all it needs is something to send it on its way. So, if we can find a way to dispose of that waste energy, and get it away from the shield, the resonance wave should collapse on its own, or at the very least, be dissipated sufficiently enough to be rendered harmless. So how do we do that? Asked Alfred. Well, since the energy on the shield face is acting like water, and the resonance wave is functioning like a tsunami of sorts, we can prevent any damage to the shields by simply shutting down a sector of the array and wrapping the outer face of the shield around the now exposed edge of the grid, creating what is essentially a spillway of sorts. The resonance wave will then simply flow over the side like water down a drain and out into empty space where it can dissipate harmlessly, said Bentley. That may work, but it's going to leave us wide open and vulnerable to attack by the Varnock during that time. Especially given how slowly the shields regenerate after being shut down even briefly, said Alfred. I realize that, but we only need to leave the door open for a short time while the wave dissipates. Once that's done, we simply reboot that section of the array, and we're back in business with no more chinks in our armor, said Bentley. Well, at least until the next wave forms, said Corbin. Hopefully we'll have help by then, and a way to dissipate that energy without needing to reboot the shield. Doctor, Chief, make it so. I'll inform the Admiral of our situation, said Alfred. Acknowledged. We'll keep our eyes peeled, and a finger in the dike if need be. Clayton out, said Mike. Sidney turned in his seat and looked at Mike in concern. So we're basically rolling out the red carpet for the Varnock, he asked. Mike frowned. It beats having a 200-kilometer wide hole blown in our shield array. It may be self-healing, but it'd have a hard time recovering from a wound that big. Pendleton turned and looked at Mike. Not to sound too obvious, sir, but if they're powering down one of the grids, we're going to have several hundred shield nodes vulnerable to attack during the several minutes it takes to reboot them, he said. That's something I've already considered. Once the wave passes, and it's safe to proceed, I plan to send part of the fleet into the breach to protect the nodes until command can restart them. Once the nodes have basic shield capacity again, they'll be able to defend themselves. Until then, it's our job to play hero and keep them in one piece. Sir, what about that approaching Varnock battleship, the one that's trying to ram his way through our shields? Asked Pendleton. Mike smiled. Oh, we'll have a little surprise waiting for him. Martin's console beeped. Sir, shield grid shutdown is commencing. Resonance wave will reach the edge of the grid in 34 seconds, she said. So what happens if this little trick doesn't work? Asked Sydney. Then we're in for the greatest fireworks display in history, said Sarah. Mike turned in his chair to look at her. What's your thoughts on this plan? Do you think it'll work? He asked. I think it will. The trouble, though, comes afterward, during the boot-up cycle. Yeah, we already know that. And you can be certain the Varnock aren't going to just let a golden opportunity like that go unanswered either. The moment the array is vulnerable, they'll come rushing in and destroy all the nodes they can to reduce or eliminate our ability to raise the shield again. If they succeed, they'll pour through that hole like cockroaches. Sir, the wave has reached the edge of the grid and is flowing down the inside as intended. It appears that it will dissipate in 1 minute, 43 seconds, after which it'll be safe to transit into the corridor, said Martin. All right, then let's get up there and protect those nodes. Notify all designated ships to advance when the wave has completely dissipated, said Mike. Aye, sir, said Martin. Mobius's eyes grew wide as he watched the display in front of him. My lord, the shield changes, shouted a crewman. Mobius shoved an operator aside and quickly worked the sensor controls, trying to get a better picture of what was happening. As he watched in amazement, a part of the shield array shut down, allowing a cloud of luminous energy to flow over the sides like a waterfall. He then watched as the resonance wave approached the opening, slid over the side, and then vanished. Moments later his sacrificial battleship arrived at high warp, and was destroyed by a volley of torpedoes just before it reached the shield. He slammed his hands down on the console in anger. He quickly focused the sensors on the opening in the shield and noticed that the shield satellites, which had generated the shield moments earlier, now lay dormant and unprotected. A sinister grin slid across his face as his gills flared with joy. He pointed towards the main display and shouted, All ships, into the breach! Destroy those emitters before they can raise their shield again. Mike watched as the Varnock fleet began to move in unison towards the breach. Well, I see he's right on schedule. Alpha Group, defend those nodes at all costs. Don't let the Varnock get near them, he said. A large formation of ship killers and battleships broke away from Mike's main formation and plunged into the breach. As soon as the Varnock were within range, they began opening fire on the shield nodes, destroying several before the fleet could get close enough to protect them. Some ships put themselves between the Varnock and the nodes while others dove straight at the enemy ships, throwing as much firepower at them as they could. At first, neither side seemed to flinch, both absorbing the blows of the other with ease. But this false stalemate didn't last long as the Varnock began losing one ship after another to the crushing onslaught of Earthfleet weapons fire. 2 of their light cruisers, who were leading the charge, were the first to go down, followed by several more. Another group of ships, who were also at the head of the attack, succumbed to the pounding being dished out to them, causing them to burst into flames and careen off into the shield grid, exploding on impact. But Earthfleet wasn't getting through this battle untouched either. 2 of its own cruisers, deep in the heart of the heaviest fighting, were soon overcome and destroyed. However, despite having overwhelming numbers, and a supposedly superior fleet, the Varnock forces were losing ships considerably faster than Earthfleet was. Even so, they still held the numerical advantage, and thus they pressed their attack. It wasn't long before the Varnock destroyed several more shield nodes, which was putting increasing pressure on the fleet, who was trying their best to protect them. Seeing this, Mike sent forward another group of ships to assist the first group, which were quickly becoming overwhelmed. Alfred turned to Corbin and said, "Where's that shield? We're losing nodes." "We're working on it, but there's just too much interference. The plasma overhead on the shield face is preventing the shields from properly regenerating," shouted Corbin. "Well, find a way to get around it," shouted Alfred. "Give us another 20 minutes and we'll have this resolved." 20 minutes? We'll lose all the nodes before then. "I'm doing the best I can, sir. I'm not a miracle worker." "Well, you need to start being one, or we're all doomed." Mike watched nervously as the battle continued to slog on painfully. While the two fleets were each successfully holding their own, the Varnock were slowly gaining the advantage as more and more shield nodes were being destroyed. Several more fleets of Earthfleet ships jumped into the area and took up position behind Mike. He shuffled them forward and then watched with dismay as a fleet of Varnock battleships broke through his defenses and made a run for the other side of the array. "Bravo Group, heads up. You've got incoming." "Bravo Group, heads up. You've got incoming," he said over the comm. "Acknowledged, Admiral," came the reply. The Varnock fleet plunged through the breach at full speed, emerging on the other side into a devastating hail of weapons fire. The lead ships took the brunt of the attack, suffering almost 100% casualties within just a few moments. The ships behind them, however, fared slightly better, as they emerged from the breach relatively unscathed. But they were soon cut down themselves only minutes later. "Enemy incursion force has been neutralized," said the Bravo Group commander. "Acknowledged. Watch for stragglers." "Aye, sir." As the larger, more powerful starships of Earthfleet did most of the heavy lifting within the breach, doing all they could to hold back the Varnock, while also protecting the vulnerable shield nodes, fighters and ship killers by the dozens bobbed in and out of the Varnock formations as they engaged ship after ship, and fighter after fighter in a melee of biblical proportions. Soon one of the Varnock battle fleets broke free of the main engagement and skirted the far edge of the breach as they tried to get in behind Alpha Group. But a formation of ship killers emerged from the breach and intercepted them, quickly reducing their roaring charge into a sniveling whimper. The remaining Varnock ships soon scattered and withdrew from the area to regroup and lick their wounds. "What's taking so long?" shouted Corbin. "The startup sequence won't complete," cried Bentley. "We've now lost 28% of the nodes. The entire outer layer is gone. Second and third layers are taking heavy casualties," cried an officer. Alfred watched helplessly as the two scientists struggled furiously to bring the shield array back online. "I can't get the nodes to sync together," said Bentley. "They won't unless the array is stabilized," replied Corbin. "What do you think I'm trying to do?" barked Bentley. "Now either help me get it stabilized, or get out of my way." Suddenly, an idea sparkled in Alfred's mind. "Can you initialize the nodes individually?" he asked. "Individually?" "Yes, but why?" asked Corbin. "We need to protect the nodes first so as to prevent the Varnock from destroying all of them. If we can't re-establish the array, then we need to, at least, allow the nodes to protect themselves. Once that's done, we can work on the other things." Corbin opened his mouth to protest, and then blinked in amazement at the simple genius of the suggestion. "Actually, that might just work. Bentley, shut down the syncing and assembly programs. Put the nodes in self-defense mode and have them power up their shields in close-form defensive configuration." "But that's not gonna plug the hole." "I know that. But, if this works, we'll still have something to plug the hole with later. So, let's just focus on protecting the nodes for now, and we'll work on closing the hole later," said Corbin. Bentley nodded and then flew across the controls as he and Corbin worked like madmen to save the remaining nodes. "Sir, the shield nodes are finally coming online. But they aren't deploying into full area protection mode. They look like they're simply trying to protect themselves as they're only deploying their shields in a defensive configuration," said Martin. Mike frowned. Well, better something than nothing. At least we're not losing nodes anymore, said Sydney. Agreed. All right, Charlie Group, get up there into the breach and give Alpha Group a hand. Delta Group, join up with Bravo and help clean up the stragglers on the starboard flank. Try to keep them busy as long as you can. Mobius slammed his fists on the console in anger as he watched the surviving shield nodes successfully power up their shields and subsequently protect themselves from any further risk of destruction. You sluggish Nastrake. They've blocked our chance to permanently cripple their shield. No matter. We will still defeat them today. All fleets, press the attack. Get as many ships through the breach as you can before they raise their shield again, he shouted. Mike watched as a large group of Varnock battleships drove for the breach. Oh. Here comes round 2. Alpha and Charlie groups, pull back to the interior of the shield and set up a defensive perimeter around the breach. Make sure nothing gets through. Delta, Bravo, cover their retreat, and then join them in securing the breach. Echo through Juliet groups, form up on the breach and execute defensive plan 2 Alpha. All other groups, you will be responsible for any ships that get past the main defensive line. Aye, sir, came the combined replies. Mike's fleets quickly regrouped as ordered and formed a defensive perimeter around the breach. The best he could do now was to keep the Varnock from getting inside the perimeter until the shield came back up. After that it would be up to Alfred and the others to plug the hole in the array. What can we do to get the shield back up again? Asked Alfred. I don't think we can anymore. From what I'm seeing here, we've lost too many nodes, and of those that remain, quite a few of them are too heavily damaged to do more than simply defend themselves. We're going to need at least a few dozen more emitters to re-establish even a basic shield again, and several hundred to completely repair it, said Bentley. Alfred grunted in frustration. What can we do with the nodes we have left? He asked. It's possible to move the nodes around in a way that will reduce the size of the breach and give the fleet a bit more of a fighting chance, but that's only a guess, as I'm not sure if we'll be able to pull that off, said Bentley. Alfred looked at Corbin. You designed them. Will this work? The nodes were designed with that possibility in mind. It'll just take time to reorganize them into a usable configuration. And, while I won't be able to close the door, I can certainly reduce it to just a crack. Do it. The two men nodded and immediately went to work. After a few minutes, Alfred turned to his duty officer and said, bring the remaining patrols inside the Kuiper perimeter and then seal it airtight. But what if the Grand Admiral needs them? Alfred inhaled deeply. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, we need to make sure that no Varnock ships can get close to Earth. This may present a minor inconvenience to the Grand Admiral, but it'll give me a bit more peace of mind. Understood, sir, said the officer. What about Pluto Station? There's a lot of merchants and delegates there, said another officer. We'll decide what to do with them when the time comes. Until then, keep the station on high alert. Aye, sir.